Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Yeah. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for joining us in class today. Kyle is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at GCN. I'm Vincent Finelli. And if you'd like to call in, we'll pay for the call. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line is up and running. If you'd like to listen to us on your phone, you certainly may. And here's the number, 605-477-3249. I noticed that I'm getting a little more grumpy as I get older. And I noticed that my fuse is becoming shorter, and I'm less tolerant of behavior that I don't think is acceptable. What am I talking about? The telephone. I don't have a cell phone. We only have a landline here at the farm. And so for years I would answer the phone, "Hi, this is Vincent," or "Hello, this is Vincent," or "Hello." And now, when I answer the phone with "hello," I don't say who I am because I have people who call me from places that I don't want to talk to. I can't help people who are in prison. I can't do it. I mean, what can I do to help someone who's in prison? So I don't announce who I am anymore. I would say hello. And the person might say, "May I speak to Mr. Finelli?" Well, then I know that that person doesn't know who I am. But lately, for months, I've been getting, I would say hello, and they'd say, "Where are you?" Really? Where am I? Because they're so used to calling other people and say, "Where are you?" Or they'd say, "What are you doing?" Who is this? It's none of your business what I'm doing. So now, I answer the phone a different way. I say, "Pizza Hut." And for those of you who are not familiar, Pizza Hut is a pizza chain where they sell discs of baked bread with some tomato sauce and some cheese and some poisonous toppings on it, like pepperoni. So I say, "Pizza Hut." I don't say hello. I just say Pizza Hut. And then the person calling will say, "I'm looking for Vincent Finelli." I go, "Okay. All right. What do you want?" Because they're not saying anymore, "Hi, there's one person that does, actually a couple. Dan Sutterfield called me this morning, and I said, "Pizza Hut." And so he introduced who he was, and he always does that. Guineith, when she calls, she always says, "Hello, this is Guineith Isaacs. May I speak to Vincent, please?" And Mrs. Finelli will say, "Sure, hold on. Let me go get him. He's either outside, or he's under a car, or he's on the tractor, or I'll have, whatever it is. May I take a message?" Whatever it is. But she always says who she is and what she would like. That's the polite way to do it. But hardly anybody does that anymore. Hardly. So let's get back into the habit of saying, "Hello, your name, why you're calling," and that would be a really nice thing to do. That way, you won't hear things like Pizza Hut. Guineith, are you there?
I'm here. Yep.
Yep.
It's absolutely true what you say. I was was trained as a professional telephonist. So, and I still do that work from time to time. And, so I think it teaches you to be polite. It really does. It teaches you how to talk on the telephone. You actually have to ask for people. You have to say please and thank you when you're on the phone. So it's and if you're calling someone and you need to speak to somebody in particular, ask for that somebody and speak clearly and, just be polite, be courteous. And remember that there's a big old world out there and people have an assortment of different sorts of days. And you don't always know what the person on the other end of the phone, you don't know what sort of day that they're having. So just be polite, and you make everybody's day better. That's what I was always taught. Yep.
I was watching a series that I kind of liked. It was called Longmire, and it's set in the West, and it's this man whose wife had died, but when the phone would ring, the answering machine would pick up, and it would be in his wife's voice. And it would be very easy for someone to say the wrong thing, like mention his wife in not a nice way, or and she had died, but not everybody knew that. And yesterday, I was on the phone with a man, and we were talking. The first time I had ever talked to him. And same thing. His answering machine is in his wife's voice. However, she died a couple months ago. And so we need to actually pay attention to what we're saying and try not to be crude and cruel, except in the case of politicians. I think we can be cruel to them. And And yesterday, something came out of my mouth that I was kind of surprised. But I mentioned that something like this, with all his money, I'm surprised that Mark Zuckerberg hasn't had a face transplant.
No, you know something? If anybody knows anything about European royalty, and they look at Mark Zuckerberg, they can pick it instantly. He's a Habsburg. If you ever look up on the internet what the Habsburgs look like, they all look like Mark Zuckerberg. Because they're all inbred and have married their cousins for about the last 8 generations.
Yeah.
They're all so inbred, they look exactly like each other. They all look like Mark Zuckerberg, including the vacant eyes. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I said Zuckerberg's not a favorite person of me either.
Yeah. Well, I don't know why we call them search engines. Maybe we should call them something like peeping Tom engines. Because that's what they are. They monitor and they spy on us and what we look up. And I mentioned that I'm probably going to teach a class here on lock picking. Now, I'm not an expert in lock picking. And some people might, when they hear this, they might think less of me, and that's okay. That's okay. But the reason I learned how to pick locks is because I own some locks that I needed to get into. I own the lock. I own what's behind the lock, but I didn't have all the keys. These are things that have been locked and the keys have just been lost over, a decade or 2 or 3. Or my parents had a lock that they've lost the key. Well, I'm not going to call a locksmith. I'm going to figure out how locks work. So I went to the library many years ago. I learned how locks work. And I thought, you know what? I can make a tool that will open locks. And it's not the way you see on TV. They just don't stick a paper clip into a lock cylinder and just wiggle it around. You need 2 tools. You need a rake and you need a torquing tool. And they never show that on TV because they don't want to show you how to do it. But it's really kind of easy. And I mentioned on the air that one of our friends, an instructor, had a camper and we were working on it together here at the farm. And there was a locked compartment which had the heating system in it. The idea was locked so that, you could access this from the outside and someone could tamper with it. So the manufacturer put a lock on it, but he didn't have the key. So I said, well, let me get a bobby pin. So I got a 3-inch bobby pin. We had one lying around the house somewhere, and I found it. And went over to the vise, and I cut it in half. And then I went over to the grinder, and I ground a specific pattern on the end of it. Then I got a file and tuned it up a little bit more. And then the other half of the bobby pin, I straightened that out, of course, and got 2 pairs of pliers, put it over the gas flame in the kitchen, and I bent it into the shape of an L. That was the torque device. And so I made this lockpick set. And then I thought, you know what? I wonder if that's illegal. But, the problem was, whether it's legal or illegal, I needed to get into this compartment. And the compartment was owned by one of our instructors who was with me, and he wanted to get in there as well. So I made this set of lockpicks. Within, 15 seconds at the most, that lock cylinder was opened, and he couldn't believe it. So I said, well, let me show you again. Showed him again, taught him how to do it, and he opened it. So there are things that I think you need to learn about, class, and things that you can do, simple things. What would you do? What would you do if you had that camper and you're out in the middle of nowhere and the heater quit and you needed to work on it? What would you do? Would you call a locksmith? How would you get there? So that led to one of my thoughts this morning. I was in the shower, and sometimes I think about things in the shower that, because of the white noise, that of the shower head and the water. And I was thinking, what would radio be like without the internet? What would that be like? Well, you could have commercials. Where would the news come from? Where would the material that radio hosts talk about come from? Because they're so used to typing into their favorite spy engine to get material. Where would the investigative reporters come from? Because what happens is the news gets rewritten by many people, and it probably doesn't have very many sources. So what would radio be like? Well, I think you'd have to have broadcasters who knew a subject and could actually talk about it. They'd have to read books. Can you imagine that? We'll be right back. Live in Australia. And so here's the question I'd like to ask the class. So think about this. If you happen to be watching or listening to mainstream media, the dinosaur media, how many broadcasts are dependent on reading other people's work and then regurgitating it without actually having done it? How many broadcasts are like that? And I would suggest that most of them are like that. People who really don't know how to do the things that they're talking about. People who have not done the things they're talking about. They just read about it and regurgitate it, but yet they have some kind of eloquence to their voice, their manner, and people believe that they know what they're talking about. And if you look at the news, which I don't look at very often, I mean, I'd be hard pressed to name some newscasters today. But in the past, they're talking heads. They're script readers. They are impersonating journalists, in my opinion. Guineith, any comments?
Yeah, I would say that the people that you have on USA Prepares, they are really world, global level experts in their field. If you think of any particular person, like, for instance, Norm Shealy, wow, what a 1 in a million doctor. That doesn't even begin to cover it, okay? You're not just talking about one lifetime's experience of being a medical expert here. you're talking about numerous lifetimes of experience of being a medical expert. And Cliff High, wow, is, words fail me. This guy actually, something, Vincent, that Cliff High actually had a key role to play in inventing the touch-tone telephone system. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
That's
but I do know.
True.
But I do know how
and the
it
internet
works.
Search engine.
Mm-hmm.
he back in the day he did some work for a major computer corporation, which was absolutely fundamental in designing the world's first search engine, basically. And if he didn't do his work back in the day, we wouldn't have the search engines that we have today. And that's even before he started doing the WebBot project. What a
you mentioned something that
computer expert, search expert.
Yeah. You mentioned something
He's
that
an amazing guy.
I find fascinating. Back in the 1970s, I learned how the DTMF system worked, and which is the touch-tone telephone system. And I worked to circumvent his work. And I don't know what... I was on the other side of the equation back then. I was a college student.
You should ask him someday.
I'm going to.
Back in the day when he was helping to invent the touch-tone telephone system. It all came down to searching for a number quickly, which basically played into the WebBot project later. But these are just two examples of world-level experts in their field. Cliff High is he is the global expert on searching for stuff on the internet. If Cliff High does not know about searching something on the internet, it's not even worth knowing. Because he helped to design the architecture.
Well, he's absolutely brilliant.
Basically.
And he's got a lexicon that is incredible.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. And he's fluent in about 6 languages or something. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's just
It's good. He's an interesting man. Gwyneth, what would you like to talk about today? I got your email.
Okay, what I would like to talk about, I would like to give some oxygen today to a case that is happening in Geraldton. And the man, we're running into the ad. We'll get to this as soon as the ad's finished. He's a very dear friend of mine, and his name is called Wayne Glue. That's Glew. And we would like to talk about Wayne Glue when we get back.
Okay, we'll be right back. So, Gwyneth, you were mentioning a case that's happening right now in Geraldton in Australia, and the man's name is Wayne Glue. Please continue.
Okay. Wayne Glue is a friend of mine. He's been a friend of mine for many, many years. I used to live in Geraldton in Western Australia, and he is an advocate for the British common law and for the Australian Constitution and for us all maintaining our common law rights that we have, rights such as habeas corpus, the right to self-defense, what you in the United States would call the Second Amendment, although, that's pretty well in tatters here now, but he believes that you still do have that. And also private property rights and the right to a fair trial and all of these fundamental common law rights that we have. They're not even human rights. They're common law rights. They're rights that we all have, And the really, really interesting thing is, Vincent, something about retired cops. They're either really, really good people or really, really bad people. You don't get anything in between, do you?
Well, yeah, and there's something else that about cops. This is all cops. They don't want people to know where they live, even when they're retired, because retired cops probably have sent people to jail, and the people in jail have friends and relatives who may want to retaliate against their friends and relatives being in jail or prison. So, yeah, I do know that.
Well, I'll tell you what, Wayne Glue is such a really, really good guy. I know people through my underworld contacts who know Wayne Glue, and they think he's a good guy.
Well, then they must have been fair. Right?
He was great. He still is great. And, you know, he was actually a police detective. So he wasn't a cop on the beat. He was an investigator. Okay? And, yeah, it's, you know, it's really, really interesting, because what he does is he basically stands up for everybody's rights, common law rights that we all have. And because of that, you know, the WA police, the blue glue has kind of gotten a bit unstuck when it comes to Wayne Glue. The blue glue doesn't stick to him too well anymore. And
that's great.
They don't like him. That is a good thing, because the police in Geraldton are positively murderous. They're horrible. They really, really are. And, you know, and the municipality and the political system and the whole works, none of them like Wayne Glue very much. But he is such a man. He's so brave and he's so strong that it doesn't matter what people think of him. He's got a nickname which is called the Bulldog, and that pretty well describes his attitude. And, you know, back in the day, if there was anybody who was doing the wrong thing who was being investigated by him, I can quite see how he wouldn't have ever given up until he'd put them away, you know. And but now he's retired. He's using those skills to another end, which is basically showing that the criminal cartel that thinks that they rule us all, they really are a criminal cartel. What they're doing is criminal, it's evil, and it's wrong. And he spends just about all day, every day, exposing it.
Yeah. Did I lose you?
That's what he does.
Very interesting, because I get calls from time to time here at the farm from a man who is a policeman. And I asked him, you know, do you listen to USA Prepares? As a matter of fact, he called me a couple days ago. And he says every day. And I asked him if he thinks the things that we're saying about the cops are true. And he said yes. So I have a feeling that, although I haven't met him in person, he's called the farmhouse here a number of times. And I have a feeling that we have a Wayne Glue here in the United States. And he got in trouble for exposing criminality. He got in a lot of trouble for that. And so he's not stuck to the blue glue either. And he's probably one of the first cops that I've talked to that is not part of the blue glue. And he believes that he's a peace officer rather than a law enforcement gangster. And so it's great to know that there are a couple out there, and I think they're very few and far between, and the blue glue needs to come apart. And even if you watch a television series called Blue Bloods, multiple generations of police officers and law enforcement in New York City, with Tom Selleck being the key personality, the key actor in this series. You'll even see that they, as portraying cops who are portrayed as good cops, break the law. They bash down doors. They violate the Constitution. And things get covered up. And you'll see it. And you'll start to think that this must be a documentary on the police system, as House of Cards is probably a documentary on the White House, as Scandal is probably a documentary on the White House, as a number of these series are exposing what is probably true that most people would not believe. So I'm glad you're bringing up this point, Guineith.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll let you know what's happening. What sort of a treatment he is getting from the system as a kind of a reward from them for his behaviour. He has discovered what I discovered, that the whole council municipal property tax system is a complete rort. Okay, and he hasn't been paying property taxes for some years. And they are trying to unlawfully do him out of his real estate. I think that's the best way of putting it. The whole system in Geraldton, the courts, I can tell you, because I have been to court cases where I have been the person in the dock in Geraldton, and I can tell you personally, the court system in Geraldton is an absolute kangaroo court. Okay, there's no town of any significance for 300 kilometres north of Geraldton or south of Geraldton. On the west of Geraldton, you've got the Indian Ocean, and on the east of Geraldton, you've got a vast desert which stretches all the way to Brisbane. Okay, it's quite literally in the middle of nowhere. And the courts in Geraldton and the police in Geraldton are a law unto themselves. They absolutely are. And they are trying to rake him over the coals. They are trying to fraudulently do him out of his real estate. And just in the last 24 hours or so, or 48 hours or so, the municipality in Geraldton, you know what they did to him? They put gigantic concrete blocks over the front of his driveway to attempt to prevent him from accessing his own farm. How's that, Vincent?
Well, I think we should all take a page out of that book, and the United States Government Corporation should do that to Mark Zuckerberg's property and Tim Cook's property and Jeff Bezos' property for all the spying that they've done on us. I think that would be a really good start, and save some of those blocks and use them for the corporate headquarters of Apple, the corporate headquarters of Amazon, the distribution centers of Amazon, the corporate headquarters of Facebook, and the list goes on and on and on for the illegal spying that they've done on us.
Well,
That'd be a good
I'll tell
start.
you what happened to those. I'll tell you what happened to those concrete blocks. Okay, I think I sent you the photos of them. Those concrete blocks got up all on their own and jumped over the farm fence and ended up in the paddock next door.
Yeah, that's why you need a backhoe,
They didn't stay in his driveway for very long.
That's why you need a backhoe and a bulldozer.
Yeah.
Yep.
We need to stop treating these corrupt police, corrupt municipalities, corrupt councils with so much respect. Yeah, and I know that earlier I sent you another email which gave out some sort of past life information, but I'm getting really frosted. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm getting really frosted at the Geraldton municipality, and I'm getting really frosted at a bunch of these people because they're just evil, you know, and oh my gosh, you know, but it was absolutely hilarious. They had not got any lawful claim on his real estate at all because fee simple title is absolute. It is absolute. title that is once alienated from the Crown cannot revert back to the Crown, okay? It is fee simple, allodial, absolute title, and unless you actually sign it away in a mortgage or in some other type of document, they cannot take it off you. Okay, it's really, and Wayne Glue is in a life or death battle with these evil people at the moment to to maintain his common law rights, and they are going to lose.
As I think about what you're saying, it reminds me that the United States of America was formed by a bunch of blue bloods, Englishmen, who revolted against the Crown. They were criminals in the eyes of the Crown. And Australia, in 1788, was the drop-off point for petty criminals against the Crown because it was too far to drop them off to America, which was, farther away. And there was a revolt going on. So, is that true that these criminals were brought there to your country, Australia, because it was a penal colony for petty criminals who happened to be skilled craftsmen who were used to build the infrastructure of Australia?
Something. When my son and I were. We have a lot of conversations while we're chopping wood at our place. It's a little bit of a social time because, especially the last month or so, I've been working pretty flat out on a particular project. And, but during the evening the computer goes flat and, I just can't work anymore. But, the conversation that we were having this evening over the wood chopping was about the founding of Australia, and that Australia, the one thing, the thing that gives me hope for this country called Australia is that it was founded by a bunch of criminals. And it might sound strange to people who are not used to listening to our show, but it means that they have very little respect for the police in this country. They hate them. They absolutely hate them. In America, in a lot of places, they tend to bow their hat and, tip their forehead a little bit and an officer goes by. There's nothing like that here in Australia. Everybody hates the police. Everybody's suspicious of them. Everybody's always hated them because the whole place has been a prison colony from the get-go. Colony. The whole place has been a prison colony from the get-go. And we know in our deep, visceral bones how the lie of the land is, that you can't trust the government, the municipality, the authority, because they're not your friend. And we've had a couple of different referendums here on whether we should accept local government in our constitution. And the last one that they scheduled was in 2012, and they didn't even go ahead with it because they knew they were going to lose, and so they just pulled it out of the vote at the last minute at the federal elections. The other times, it's been 80% against recognizing local government, so-called, constitutionally in this country, because there's no constitutional basis in this country, Australia, under our Australian Commonwealth of Australia Constitution for recognition of municipal government. It doesn't exist, and that is the grounds of what Wayne Glue is fighting them on. That's the grounds of what I fought them on. And, anyone who fights them on that is going to end up in the High Court of Australia, and they're soiling their drawers. the municipalities, because people are beginning to wake up, and they're going to begin, and they are beginning to bring cases before the High Court of Australia regarding the constitutionality of municipal governments, because there are no constitutional basis. That means they don't exist under the Australian Constitution. They are a private corporation, and you don't have to consent to contract to them, and you should not consent to contract to them. And if you are in Australia, you need to stop paying your property taxes, and we need to have a tax revolt in this country.
Yeah, well, just don't limit it to...
Just stop paying your property taxes. They're a criminal cartel, and you don't have to pay out to them.
We'll be right back. Hour number 2 of USA Prepare. So my understanding, Guineith Isaacs, is that Australia was the drop-off place for people who were convicted of petty crimes. Not necessarily really violent crimes, but people who just didn't follow all the rules, allegedly, that the Crown wanted them to follow, and they had to be done away with without, they couldn't murder them, couldn't execute them because the alleged crimes were not that serious. But these were people with skills. So they moved them off to Australia to set up a base there, right? To conquer Australia. Yeah. Isn't that what happened?
Well, some of them were violent criminals.
Okay.
I have a hobby. I collect biographies. Because you can find out a lot about how the world really operates from reading people's biographies. And I have a biography on my shelf. It's called The Great Shame. It's written by Thomas Keneally, okay, very, very famous author. And he researched the life of a particular man by the name of James Larkin. That's Larkin. And James Larkin was significant because he was an indentured servant, and he burnt down a manor house in Ireland. So he was not a petty criminal. He was in the Republican Brotherhood in Ireland, and he burnt down a manor house. He burnt down his landlord's house. So that's not petty crime.
No, I agree with that.
And he was transported to Australia, and there were a great many people like him. But what I'm saying is that the people of this country, because they tended to have a nonconformist, rebellious streak, they still have a nonconformist, rebellious streak, and it's a part of the esprit de corps of this nation. And actually, the longer I live here, the more I like the Australian nature. It took me a long time to understand it because I didn't grow up here. I grew up in New Zealand, although my parents were Australian. And, if I had been born in Australia, I would be a fifth-generation Australian. But my parents were Australians, moved to New Zealand, and then I was born and I grew up there, and then I moved back here. If that makes sense, when I was 17. And so it took me a long time. And now and again, my children and I still have friendly banter about the whole Australia-New Zealand thing. It's rather similar to the Canada-United States thing, or, the Canada or the US-Mexico thing. But really, it's kind of by the by because Australians are not conformists. They don't want to do what they're told. And I think that that's the one great hope for Australia in dealing with these evil criminals who think they rule us, is that trying to tell Australians what to do is a little bit like herding cats. Okay, I don't know if you've ever heard of that saying.
Yeah, I've heard of herding cats and pushing a rope. Yeah, same kind of thing.
Yeah.
But why is it...
They just don't want to do what they're told.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Yeah.
Why is it then that your government corporation will not allow you to have firearms, or most of you to have firearms?
Oh, they're frightened of us. They're frightened of us. I'm sure of it. Yep. Because they can see, you know, you've heard of Crocodile Dundee. Paul Hogan was actually a personal friend of my husband's before he was famous, because my husband Archie and Paul Hogan had a job together, because my Archie was a qualified painter and decorator, and Paul Hogan was working as a brush hand painting the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And if you look up Paul Hogan's history and biography, he talks about how he used to paint the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And then he'd start at one end and then paint, and then get to the other end, and it'd be time to turn around and start at the other end again. Well, he was a brush hand, and he was working for my husband. My husband was the qualified painter. And so they had a lot of time to talk together, because they were working side by side painting the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And, you know, it's they got to, you know, enrolling in a talent quest one day. It was called Kevin Dennis's New Faces. It was kind of like, I don't know, America's Got Talent or something. And my husband was a professional entertainer. He had owned his own nightclubs and all that sort of thing. And so my husband and Paul Hogan both entered, and Paul Hogan won, and that was the beginning of his career. And my husband came second. So that's a bit of the history there. But you look at Crocodile Dundee, right? Mm-hmm. If you can imagine a country where, I mean, yeah, that's an exaggerated version of Australia, but I think inside of every single Australia who's really aware of what's going on, there's a little bit of Crocodile Dundee there. And they don't like us, and they think that if they let us have firearms, that they're going to be in big trouble. But legally and lawfully, they are in big trouble anyway, because Australians are waking up left and right and centre. And we are not going to put up with this for much longer, of what they're doing to us. Because one thing Australians really, really hate is they hate being pushed around. They hate being told what to do. They are just that little bit, or not just that little bit, just that quite a lot of Cockney, East End, Irish Republican, Scottish Highlander rebel in them, and they don't like being told what to do. Because the reason why they have that sort of outlook and that sort of breeding and that sort of ancestry is because that's the sort of people who came out and first colonized this country. They were the petty thieves of the East End of London. They were the Fenian rebels of Ireland. They were the dispossessed Scottish Highlanders who went down and, got some payback on the landlord who had kicked them off their land. This all happened 200 and 300 years ago or whatever, and these were the people who got transported to Australia. And for whatever reason, they found grace and mercy in the sight of the Crown, ha-ha, and instead of being strung, they got sent here. And, the British Crown didn't actually realize it at the time, but they were creating the seeds of one of the most independent, ferociously independent people on earth, together with the Americans. And then when we got our independence, supposed to be from Britain, we got a kind of a hybrid form of government between the Westminster system and the American Republic. And it works well here, but it would work even better if we had a Second Amendment in our Constitution. Instead, we've got Section 72, which says that all all rights not specifically granted to government are retained by the people. Okay? And that is our we the people. And that means if the government under the Constitution has not been specifically granted a particular right, then that right is retained by the people. And there potentially is the path for Australians to get back to the right to bear arms, because the right to bear arms is not specifically denied to us by the Constitution, and therefore it is granted to us under Section 72 of the Constitution. You know, but it's not specifically spelled out in the way that it is. And I think that back in the day, the founders of the Constitution did not specifically spell out that right because they really didn't want us to have it, but they couldn't deny it to us either, if that makes any sense, Vincent.
Mm-hmm. How about taxes? What are taxes like in Australia? Because I was reading that the tax rate can be 0, 19%, 32.5%, 37%, or 45% as of 2017. What are they really like?
Oh, the taxes here are horrible. The top tax bracket kicks in at just $50,000, and it's 45%. If you're on a PAYE, if you're a wage earner, that means pay as you earn. That means your taxes get deducted from your wallet before you ever see them. So if you're earning $50,000 a year, you only get to see like 30,000 of it. It's horrible. And the poverty line here in this country is something like, oh gosh, I forget, maybe $80,000. So if you're earning less than $80,000, technically in this country, you're in poverty.
Is that for a family?
You know, that's for a household. Uh-huh. Household income. Yeah.
So that's an enormous amount of taxes. It's kind of like where we are. I believe our taxes, if you add them all up in the United States, when you take into account federal taxes, Social Security taxes, income taxes, state income taxes, sales taxes, gasoline, fuel taxes, all the fees and taxes, when you add them up in the United States, I think we're at 65 to 75% for most people, which is out of control.
Really accurate here, and we need a tax revolt.
Yeah, don't keep it just to yourselves, because there are other places that need them too. We'll be right back. There are only 4 states that don't have sales tax. That would be Oregon, New Hampshire, Montana, and Delaware. The other states in the United States do have sales tax. Most of them have a sales tax in excess of 6%, and that would be sales tax that would be combined state sales tax plus local sales tax. So in Missouri, about half of the sales tax that we pay goes to the state, and the other would be considered local. But it's still really, really high. It's about 8%. Actually, it averages probably a little over 8%. The highest sales tax state in the United States is Louisiana at just about 10%. Tennessee is just a little bit behind that. Arkansas and Alabama are just below that, but still above 9%. So that's just state and local sales tax. Then you have all the other taxes, and it really is oppressive. And I'm actually surprised that we haven't had a tax revolt of serious consequences yet. I'm very surprised, because so much of our income is being taxed. And if you look at your cell phone bill, if you have one, class, take a look at all the nuisance taxes that are added to your cell phone bill or your landline bill. It's unbelievable how many taxes are added. And they say that people vote for this stuff. I only know one jerk. Actually, it's a family of jerks that was for an increase in sales tax. I only know one, but they got their way, and we got a sales tax increase in our locality in Missouri. When do you think we're going to have a revolt? Guineith, do you have a feel for it? Do you think it'll be in our lifetime?
I think it's probably going to be fairly soon. Okay, you're beginning to see a property tax revolt here in Australia, but it's the first adopters at the moment. Okay, it's myself. It's Wayne Glue. It's a few high sort of educated people that are basically doing it. And what is going to happen is probably going to end up in the High Court of Australia. I'm really, really surprised that the Geraldton bureau rats over there have not just withdrawn the whole Wayne Glue thing, because I reckon they probably know that they're fighting a losing battle. Okay? But they just want to hammer him because he knows what a bunch of criminals they are, and he doesn't hold back, and he publishes really, really detailed public letters on Facebook probably about 2 or 3 times a week. So he would be writing about 6 or 7 or 8,000 words a week in research on how these people are criminals, how they're breaching the Constitution. And you can go to his Facebook page. If you go and search Wayne Glue on Facebook, that's W-A-Y-N-E, and his surname is G-L-E-W, on Facebook, and he's in Geraldton, and, he has the lion and the unicorn as his, his Facebook thumbnail. That's how you'll know that you've got him. You'll have the crown coat of arms. That's his Facebook thumbnail with the lion and the unicorn and the shield in the middle. Do you know what I mean, Vincent?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anyone who, if you want to know what the British coat of arms is, the royal coat of arms, just go and look for it. It's a well-known symbol. It's got a lion, it's got the unicorn, it's got the English Islands, Scotland, Wales symbols in the middle. And, that sort of thing. So, but search for him. He's going to court on the 11th of December at 10 a.m. in the morning at the Geraldton Courthouse. It's on Marine Terrace.
Guineith Isaacs is with us. Guineith, over the weekend I got a call from one of our affiliates, and one of the owners of a radio station. And the owner said, commented on Guineith Isaacs. You were particularly singled out as being really bright and a joy to listen to. And I said, yeah, you're absolutely right. Guineith really is bright. Guineith, I read some of your writing. And I've got to tell you that your style of writing, the lexicon that you use, the emotions you evoke are right up there with the best of the best of the best. And I'm not exaggerating. I am so impressed. So I just wanted to let you know what I saw and what I read of your work is impressive, to say the least. No exaggeration.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I have actually been working on a literary project, and so I'm not going to say too much about that at the moment.
I understand.
It has been submitted to a publisher, but I can't give too many details out about that at the moment. What I would like to do, okay, I'm not going to give out any names, but I would like to go into a little bit about the past life thing, okay? If that's okay with you, Vincent.
Oh, of course. I've had a past life regression.
Like I say, past life regression, because I've sort of been humming and hawing of how much I should say here because it is kind of sensitive. And I know that you know that what I'm saying is true because the email I sent you earlier of who I was in a past life. And I was in a past life, not in this life. In this life, I have absolutely not been a career criminal. But in this past life, I was an inveterate career criminal, and I was really quite a piece of work. And you know, I actually was found guilty of my crimes, and I was sentenced to hang. But I was, first of all, the sentence was first of all respited, and then I was granted a full pardon. And I have found this out from reading in history books about this particular career criminal. And the more, you know, it's just occasionally this person's name comes up. As I'm busy, you know, reading and going through documents, and because what I'm doing is I'm researching how the underworld operated in previous centuries, okay? Because it's useful. You can build a pattern. You can see how things used to be, the mode of behavior, and sometimes it reflects pretty well. Sometimes you see the same playbook operating in this modern world. And you think, wow, things have not changed in like 300 or 400 years. And I'm sort of researching, and I knew, by the way, I have known about this particular past life for the last 16 or 17 years. I first found out about this particular past life maybe 16, 17, possibly even 18 years ago. So this is not something that I've, just come up with off the back of my hand. But I didn't know this person's name until after my husband died. Okay, and then I began to, before that, the years before that, my husband and I were doing past life regressions, okay? And my husband in this life, in that past life, was also a career criminal, and he worked with me, and we were in love with each other in that past life. And, it's really amazing because you see how souls tend to find each other across lifetimes. If you get a soul that you really, really, really bond to in a particular lifetime, then your soul will find them in the next lifetime, even though they might be born on the opposite end of the world to you, which was certainly how it was with Archie and I. And in this lifetime, in between painting the Sydney Harbour Bridge and hanging out with Paul Hogan, my husband was a career criminal. He was a gangster, but, they can't touch him now because he's dead. He died of a heart attack in 2003. But he certainly had some rather interesting situations that I got to hear about. But you know what, Vincent? I'm reading and researching the things that I saw 16, 17, and 18 years ago about this particular career criminal. who is known, who is named in the history books. There's a great deal known about this fellow's life. What I knew from past life regressions 16, 17, and 18 years ago, I am now just beginning to find out the historical accuracy of what I saw all those years ago in my regression work. And it is for sure the same person. This person is named, and I knew this person's name from within about between 3 and 6 months of my husband dying, when Google got invented, and I went on Google and I searched for historical documentation to attempt to verify the past life data, and sure enough, there it popped up, because we knew a lot of information, but we knew no names. That was the thing with the regression work that we did, and I don't know how common that is, but it was a certain set of very, very unique circumstances and very precise details about what sort of a person I was in my past life. And actually, when I first found out these details, I didn't want to know. I said, "Am I really seeing this? This is just, wow, this is a bit beyond the par." But I looked up in the history, and it was actually accurate from my historical sources. And the historical source, it said something like, this person, what was it? Something like, it named this person specifically as being a violent and lusty person. Some words to that effect. Fierce. That's right. Fierce and lusty person is the quote that is in this particular history book that is quoting from an older source regarding this particular person. And do you know something, Vincent? That matches up exactly with what I saw 16, 17, and 18 years ago when Archie was still alive, and when we were doing our past life regression work into this particular lifetime that we shared together a long time ago. And we are talking about hundreds of years ago. We are not talking about anything that is recent, okay? My husband paid with his life for his crimes, and like I said, I was sentenced to hang, but the sentence was respited, and then I was later acquitted. And then I apparently drop out of the pages of history, and nothing more is heard of me. But at the time, we would make Bonnie and Clyde look rather tame. That is who we were in that lifetime. And the thing that really concerns me, okay, if it ever went to a Mad Max scenario, I can tell you something, Vincent. I would not be sitting by if it went to a Mad Max scenario in this country. I'm not talking about planning anything or anything like that at the moment. No. I don't want things to go that way. But if it ever went to a Mad Max scenario, I would be surviving, and I would be organizing for other people to survive where I am. And I would be the dispenser of justice in a Mad Max scenario in the place where I am. And other people would begin to, I believe that other people actually would sort of pick up on that. But like I said, I really hope that it doesn't get to that level. But, lives tend to follow the same pattern through a series. You mentioned about you being a farmer. and you're trying to organize everybody. I think that if it ever went to a Mad Max scenario, that, I wouldn't be sitting on my hands.
Right, I mentioned,
sense, does that make sense to you?
Yes, I mentioned on air that during my past life regression with Dr. Norman Shealy, that I saw myself as a farmer, as one who was trying to organize, and it was to defend our village, and I had a really tough time. Same thing that's happening right now. I just couldn't get people motivated to protect their own interests. Class and Guineith, in my past life regression, I saw myself as a guerrilla warrior. A failed one. I was not successful in rallying the village. And today, I'm becoming more intolerant of stupid people, lazy people, people who won't read, people who won't learn from their mistakes, and people who won't help themselves. I talked to a number of people, and, people who have maladies, people who have illnesses. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, Norm Shealy's with us, Dr. Norman Shealy. Doctor of the Year, Surgeon of the Year, world-renowned. He will help you. We'll give you as much time as you need on the air, no charge. We'll even pay for the call. All you have to do, is call this number, and I'll even give them the number. 866-582-9933. All you have to do is call between the hours of 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. on Monday. He's with us on Mondays. You can ask all your questions. You can be anonymous. You can use your name or not. You don't even have to say where you're calling from. And I find that no one will call them to even help themselves. And I have a feeling that one of our instructors could sense this in my voice. And he just sent me an email during this broadcast. And there is a painting. And over the face of this man who is in the painting are the words, "Intolerance is the most masculine of all virtues and the father of civilization." That's from Robert Stewart, USA Preparedness Instructor. Thank you, Robert, for sending me that. And I think that men need to be men. If you don't have a set, grow a set. If you have a set, take them out of your pocket. Stand for principle. Take a stand. Guineith is the poster lady for women. To be tough, to help your family, to defend your family.
Don't let them have your children.
Don't let them have your children, right. Stand up for what you believe in. I was once talking to one of our instructors, and we were talking about grades at the university. And I said, "So what was the worst grade you got?" He said, "Well, an F." And I said, "Okay. Well, I got an F minus. I literally got an F minus. The professor had to actually go out of his way to lower my grade from F to F minus. And why? Because he talked about Christopher Columbus and others in history using derogatory slang terms. And I was in the back of the class, and I stood up and I said, "Mr. Blank," and I used his name. I didn't come here for that. I came to your class to learn about history, not to hear derogatory names about nationalities. And that earned me right then and there an F minus. I stood for principle. Now, sometimes you pay a price for doing that. And I paid the price. And now you know that your instructor, Vin Finelli, got an F-. And it's impossible to get a lower grade than that. That's the bottom. There's no lower grade than F-. And I was able to get one for standing on principle. So sometimes you have to pay the price. Do I regret it? Absolutely not. Have I ever mentioned it before today? No. You're the first to hear it.